Okay, this is our second workshop on experimental methods. Everybody excited? Yeah! Wow, I wish I could get such a response from my undergraduate students. Can you come to the lectures, please? So experimental methods all week, and I hope everybody has had a look at the program. Does everybody have a copy? Great, very well prepared. If you don't, there are some more copies here next to the coffee. So, what we're trying to do in this workshop is give you a not so quick and dirty introduction to how to use experiments and how to use experiments mainly with humans. I know some of you have run experiments in the past. Some of you might be preparing your first CogNovo experiments. Others here haven't even thought about doing an experiment before they joined CogNovo. Don't despair. Hopefully there's something for everybody in here. Experimental methods, it's very psychology heavy, but we try to integrate some other perspectives as well. So hopefully it will be interesting for all of you. Because we have such a range of experience here, there are things that we cannot cover. And there are things that we cannot probably cover in enough detail. Now I think Sue has mentioned that to you before. If there are things that you want to learn in more detail, I think Sue mentioned very many people are interested in EG. We give you a short EG introduction on Friday. But if there are other things that you hear in the workshop that you want to learn more about, I think we can try to arrange that over the year. I should also mention that psychology has a couple of master programs, actually one also on experimental methods or research methods. So there might be courses there that you might be interested in as well, and you obviously can join, and Chris is organizing some of them, and he's nodding here as well, okay? So this is more or less all I had to say about the program itself. If you looked at the program, we do have some of our external partners here as well. They're coming in this week. Please talk to them, grab them if you're interested in what they're doing. I think it's a great opportunity. Some of them haven't been here for our first inaugural workshop, so it's great to meet them and talk to them and learn about their expertise as well. Any questions on that? Okay, great. Now, some of you have noticed on the program, there is something called the research project competition, and I think there were some worried questions about that as well. Okay, I tried to enlighten you. It's obviously very important, so if you have questions, do interrupt me anytime. But it's hopefully a very fun activity. So we thought, rather than you sitting here all week letting this wisdom wash over you, we try to engage you a little bit in what you're learning. And we thought, well, one way to engage you is to have you participate in a research project competition. So what we did, or what we want you to do, is in groups of 5, CogNovo fellows, develop an experiment. And what we would like you to do when you develop this experiment is to integrate what you've learned in this workshop. So you can use some of the methods that you've learned. You should talk about things like design. You should talk about things like research ethics, or at least think about it. And present your project on Friday over coffee and cake, and each group has about 10 to 15 minutes. So to be clear, this is a competition. You are working in groups. And you will be judged on your project. You will judge each other. We have kind of a rating system. What is important also to keep in mind, yes, presentation counts, but that presentation doesn't count for everything. So if you have a very flashy presentation, but not very good content, not so good, okay? So yes, think about your presentation, but also very much think about your content, and think about how your content might answer some of the things you hopefully learned this week. Any questions on that so far? Is that clear? Now, what kind of experiment do we want you to develop? So we came up with a question, which is hopefully fun for everybody. And what we want you to answer or develop a project for is, are aliens created? Now this sounds hopefully fun. It's not a joke question though, so don't treat it like a joke. I think it does relate to some of the things that you have been discussing in your WhatsApp talks. What is creativity? How can you measure it? How could you measure that in an alien? That's your task. You should try to find an answer to this question. Now I did talk about groups, so you will be working together in groups of 5, and we allocated you to different groups. This allocation was not random, because we wanted to have as large a range of different disciplines in each group. So these are the 5 different teams. Everybody found themselves? Okay. And of course the question, are aliens created, is a bit, well, it's hard, right? I mean, which alien are we talking about? Is it the blob? Is it E.T.? Who are we going to actually measure? Now, each team can pick an alien. So you will work on, each team gets 1 alien, and you have to measure the creativity of your alien species. Now I would like to, every member, now you can come up. I would like a representative from each group to come up and pick an alien. Team 1.
Just do the first name, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Or Michael.
Okay, Michael. They're only 5. They're not jokers.
Oh yes, the only one I know. That's a very good. From Hitchhiker's Guide. Yes, there you go.
So we have
They write poetry. They do write poetry. It's creative. Yeah. Write poetry.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, every team has their alien. I was very quick. Are there any questions? I think I have one thing to say about the presentation. I think we put in the program post a presentation, but this is optional. If you want to present a poster, that's fine. If you want to put on some other sort of presentation, that's fine as well. Again, don't necessarily treat it like a joke, treat it as a fun activity, but it should be, you should develop a kind of serious experimental project for that. Hello everybody. Is that working? Yes, yes it is. Hello, good afternoon everybody. It's our final CogNovo workshop session. It's probably the most exciting one. So, you can finally present the fruit of your labor. Are aliens created? I told you this is a real competition, so there will be a winner, hopefully. And maybe you thought, I'm going to be the one who's going to rate your project. Actually, I'm not. So all these bribes you gave me all week, thank you very much. I'm just going to keep them. But actually, you will rate stuff. And I think Doris was trying to introduce these fancy clicker things. So everybody gets a clicker and you can vote after each presentation. We prepared some questions that you should answer. And obviously the team with the highest score will be the winner. And please don't vote for your own team, that would be a little bit biased. Okay? So I'll distribute those and then you can start. Ready?
Hello, thank you Michaela for having us, thank you Sue, thank you everybody for inviting us from Valent Yutani to talk a bit about creativity in xenomorphs. We're going to show some preliminary research about this. just going through the agenda, we'll talk a little bit about us, then our research question, methodology, why we choose the design we choose, what database we have, object of study, experimental findings, some results, and some conclusions. But let's start about Weyland-Yutani. As most of you should know, we are in synthetic spaceships, computers. We build interplanetary shipping. We operate human colonies. Our main sites are in Tokyo, London, and so on. And I'm glad to say that we're just opening a field office in Plymouth, Plymouth University. I will come to that back later. And actually, you might have heard about, read about us in the press. Actually, it's not true. We are the good guys, and this is really the hipster test. And we are very open about our research. So we're coming, without further ado, to our research interest. We would like to use alien species, and here I have, unfortunately, I have to black out a little bit of the presentation because it's classified by the government. Our research question is, can we access alien creativity regarding to the thing we are working on, which I cannot tell you about without having to kill anybody, and we're sure we have the means to do that. From the research question comes the question of methodology, which, how do we design a study? We decided for participant observation. Participant observation, a couple of words, it's from the ethnographic research community. It basically means you come to a community, you live with them, you study them, you make notes, and from this you draw your primary data. So it's a qualitative method. There is some road to quantitative methods. I will show you an example of this, but it comes mainly, it's mainly qualitative. How we justify that? First of all, we think aliens are just humans. They should be studied like humans. So we have a bridge between anthropology and xenology. That's our field. Second, we are in early pilot stage. The guys of you who got the lab tour the last couple of days down there, you might have not seen this lab. Third justification, we tried to get them for quantitative testing. We sent out letters, we got a response rate of 0. And the people who brought the letters didn't come back. And the fourth reason is our scientists are mainly drawn from military, so we already can order them to do whatever we want. It's in their contracts. These guys will do. So our researchers are also covered ethically, and that's why we use this method. So our data, some of you might have seen, we have put quite a lot of body of primary data out there. Some of you might have seen these documentary movies that came out in the last couple of years. So these movies are actually our basic research, our base. This is the result from the participatory studies. And I come to the object of study, the xenomorphs. Show you a little video. Isn't it heartwarming? It's impossible not to have a warm fuzzy feeling about this thing. So the xenomorphs come in different stages of the development. I just go very quickly over it. Facehugger, this is a typical adult. There are also like variations. This is one which came out of a dog. As you might have seen, it's called the runner. And then we have these wonderful species like the queen. That's a very rare picture. Not many people have survived this watching TV. So you're really in a lucky position. So now to the heart of our research, our experimental findings. I want to show you what these creatures are capable of, and we start with learning from observation. So here's the important point. You see, we have it in these chambers. We can guess them. It's not very nice for them. And the second time you saw when our researcher put out his hand, the creature had learned his lesson. So this is like, I would say, the base for one important basis for creativity. But now we come to real deployment of creativity. This is active camouflage. Yeah. So it was not passive camouflage from blind evolution, it was active camouflage, it was really actively hiding. That's very creative. Finding novel solutions, this is like a situation, we had 3 of them in a test chamber, and normally they cannot come out of the test chamber. So what happens? It was a bit fast, so I explain what happens. They cannot get out of the test chamber. What they did was they used one of their own to rip it apart, because in their inner constitution they have a very strong acid. They ripped one apart to burn a hole in the chamber and escape by the chamber. I think that's a very clear display of creativity. Also operating human devices, our technician. That was very fast. Our technician Frank, he was dealing with the IT department at that time. He was inside the test chamber, the alien got outside and operated the human device, and Frank was missing. And the 5th exhibit, I think this is like, this is really a very strong convincing argument. The queen is caught by the predators. So what happened here? The queen was caught by the predators. She was in this entrapment. And again, the group assembled together, they used their own acid to free the queen. So this was a coordinated effort, this was group thinking, this was group creativity. This is like what we want to study a bit more. Unfortunately, our research director is not here at the moment, so we try to make a connection to her. She will explain the results. Connection's a bit bad, sorry. Yeah, thank you. So what you've seen so far are qualitative arguments for the creativity of the xenomorphs. Based on our research interests, we also found a quantitative measure, and that's the mortality rate comparison. I will show you some evidence. You see in the first column the mortality amongst the human population, and you see it along all these documentaries we made. In the second, you see the synthetics, basically the robots. They had some fatalities too. In the third one, you see the aliens, the facehuggers, and the alien queens. And we can argue that the facehuggers are quite weak, so there's a lot of fatality between them. But in general, you see that the aliens, the humans have quite some higher mortality over time. We think we can confirm that study in some. We have to do some more research, send more humans to them. This is a qualitative result for the creativity regarding conflict. So our conclusions: we have successfully deployed participant observation as a research measure applied to xenology. We presented evidence for quite some creative behavior. We added a quantitative measure for creativity in combat situations. Our data shows that there are some more elaborate military tactics, which is unpublished. We have to do more research. So first of all, our first conclusion is we need more funding. Our second conclusion is, and that gets out of the scientific context because we are all humans here, I think, that humans love aliens, aliens love humans, and I want to show this at the end of the presentation. Just a little face licking going on here. And it's reciprocal, so it's not only the aliens are licking us, but we are licking back. So it kind of, we established some kind of social component already. Humans love aliens, aliens love humans. Here are references. Thank you very much.
Are you taking questions from the...
Yeah, I'll take questions. Just nothing about the
remember the final scene, that was actually an emotional impression, you know, until there's also a family relationship between these two, if you remember the movie.
Yeah, it's quite right. We discovered that they are capable for horizontal gene transfer, so each creature, they're parasites, so when they invade a creature, they come out of it, there's some, the whole relationship trees are going to be reshuffled, basically, so we're kind of a big intergalactical family. So that's quite nice, yeah.
I have a question. You seem to have done a lot of studies on this extraterrestrials. For me, it seems like you have a problem with ethics.
Oh, yeah, as I mentioned, if you have military as your researchers, you basically you have free to go. It's a free for all. They sign up, they come back, they don't come back. I mean, that's what the military is for, right? Does it answer the question? So the ethics committee signed our research. That should answer it.
So you mainly do research in the period of war?
Yeah, no. We are doing research for both civilian and defense reasons.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the soldiers you have consent, but what about the cinemas? I don't think you are going to discuss whether they agree to participate in the research.
Sorry?
The xenomorphs, do they agree to participate in the research?
Participatory observation is basically your observatory creature doesn't really have to agree to the research. It does have to agree to get you into their place and be good friends and do some stuff. And yeah, that's what we were basically. The problem is every time we send somebody, they kill him. So we cannot really be sure that they didn't say no. So we opted for a kind of opt-out. We had no opt-out.
Have you tried game theory with
No, but
humans versus...
But that's a brilliant idea. I love that idea. Really love it. Thanks. That's awesome.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much. Ready?
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we're team 2, and our alien was Yoda. So the aim was to discover if Yoda is creative or not. This is Yoda. He's very old, and we don't really know much background about him, or it doesn't seem like there's very many Yodas in the Star Wars universe either. So we don't know any knowledge about him. Next slide. So to approach this, we sort of first got very philosophical about the whole question, and then figured out what issues and limitations there might be. So the first thing we thought of was about the environment and its physiology. Maybe they're incomprehensible compared to ours. It might be very hard to measure in the same way that we measure humans. For example, like his mind might be his food, for example, or the way of sensing might be massively different. And there's also an issue with language and communication. He might talk in a direct way to us, and there might be no way of translating English into the Yoda language or the alien language. His time scale and his size might be massively different. So he might work in the order of milliseconds, in the order of billions of years, and we'll have no way of telling that. and also the size might be very small, very big. And the sort of practical issue we thought of was the ethics. Who do we apply to ethics for? Is it the Yoda world, or is it the sort of human ethics we apply to? Or maybe it's a combination of the two, and there might be some sort of conflicting understanding of what ethics are and how to deal with them. And also there's the problem of consciousness. Maybe Yoda isn't a conscious being, maybe he's part of a distributed a group of Yodas. And again, it's a similar thing with the agency. How do we know he has agency? We'll put a hand over to Clara 9.
Okay, so based on this discussion, we decided to make some assumptions. So basically, we decided to look at behavior because it's something we can participate by our senses. So this behavior should be natural and originated in Yoda world, not really our. And probably it should be non-verbal because even Yoda is sometimes discussing with us, it's sometimes taking us too long to understand what he's actually saying to us, or what is the point. And so basically it should be kind of physical behavior. And probably even we have quite a wide knowledge about physiological measurements of mental states. It's not really applicable for aliens, especially for Yoda. We are not really sure how his mind works and where is his mind, or is it their mind. And yes, there is some communication available, so we can communicate. And it's kind of assumption that we gonna engage Yodas, a lot of Yodas in our experiment. But yes, so of course our resources should be quite big. And the time scale is quite a long one. Just one assumption, this last kind of important assumption, because we are not sure about this agency, so if the Yoda is in the physical world, maybe it's the world of force, maybe Yoda is just kind of body moving, but some mind somewhere there, maybe it's just distributed knowledge between the Yodas. So we're gonna measure in our experiment the physical appearance of Yodas. And the creativity of physicality of Yoda will be investigated. So, in our definition of creativity, because we're gonna measure creativity in the end, we decided to look in the behavior, is it novel and useful? And the behavior we choose, it's quite basic for this guy, so it's fighting. So we are going to try to see if Yoda's facts are creative. Is his movements or his there's novelty and usefulness in the creativity in the fights. So we're going to measure the fights.
But before that, we thought about another way to approach the whole problem. The most easiest thing is obviously just ask them, right? So there's a website, he answers all the questions, and yeah, creativity is obviously just a way of more. So when research done, you can spend our grants on vacation or whatever you want. But since this got a bit boring after a while, we decided to develop another experiment. And this basically consists of 3 phases. The first phase, we randomly distribute our group of Yodas to 2 different subgroups. One would be the Yoda test group, and the other would be the Yoda control group, and we let them fight against each other. And the probability of winning should be equal for both groups. So it's our hypothesis for the first phase. After this phase, we prepare a artificial intelligence fighter, which is named
General Green.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just can't get the wrong name. And he basically learns all the moves from phase 1, so he's equal in strength concerning the fighting. And during the phase 2, we let the test group of Yodas fight against the artificial intelligence and measure the wins again. So that's our measurement. And we expect the Yoda to win if there's something like creativity, because the artificial intelligence fighter knows all the previous done, all the moves that has been done before, and it should be equal in strength, and only creativity can win the fight. So that's our assumption. And in the third phase, we let the by now probably pretty exhausted test group fight against the control group again, and our expected outcome is that both groups win an equal number of fights if there's nothing like learning or memory involved in the whole development of the fights. So this is pretty much just to equal the noise from our data. We were also thinking about limitations and problems with our whole experiment. We have made so many assumptions. If we just think that any of those, all those assumptions have a probability of around 90% of being true, we just take 3 of them into account, we have already like 20-something% of uncertainty or false positives, false negatives in there. We have only 70% of certainty in the whole experiment, so it might be that the whole amount of money is not spent very well, in a very good way. But another problem we have is that the movements that are fed into the artificial intelligence is not the whole catalog of fights that is or fight movements that is available for the lightsaber fighting school that Yoda is in. So this might not be complete. And to make the experiment better, we were thinking about limiting the number of fights and the number of movements per fight. But this again would increase the error rate in our experiment. And Tara will tell you some other possibilities that we talked about.
Right, so we discussed some alternative possibilities for experiments. So we started with observations, but we thought we could go in there, look at Yoda's known environment, behaving naturally, and with our selection definition of creativity, and look for that, for evidence of creativity that way. Another possibility was using peer group methods, where we get some Yodas to come in, we talk to them about what it is that we're looking for, and we're trying to see whether it exists, and then they can go and discuss within their group and then bring us back the results, in the hope that that would remove some of the human-centric perspective and the difficulty of interpretation of their different behaviors that we might have. And an alternative experiment, if we take the divergent thinking view of creativity, we might try to adapt these, for example, alternative uses task for Yodas. So select an object that they use for a certain goal, for a certain purpose, and then asking them to provide possible interesting uses and creative uses that they can think of. That would assume some verbal communication, because obviously the task is verbal, but some way to possibly go around that would be to ask them to act out these behaviors, but then, of course, you might be removing some, so for example, really aggressive behaviors. And then over to Tom right now to discuss our evaluation and some final thing.
Hi. Near the end, I want to talk about what kind of difficulties we face in the very beginning. And actually, when we started to discuss about this project, we had a lot of arguments because we have many different opinions and we have a lot of fights. And maybe that's why we come up with fighting as our experiment. In our group, for example, we raised some questions like, is creativity only for human beings? Someone argued that creativity only comes from the higher order executive function, like human brains. But someone say creativity also can happen in the animals. So this kind of questions all depends on how we look at creativity. And the other argument is, does creativity require agency or intent? For example, is creatures' behaviors for evolution creative? We can use bees as an example. As we know, when bees find some flowers and there's some honey inside, and when they go back to their hives and they try to dance to tell other bees about the distance and direction of the flower. So the question is, were these intended to be creative to generate this communication, or it's just we think too much, they just want to have, it's their instinctive behaviors. So we are kind of lack of consensus of what creativity is. So therefore, instead of giving you any specific conclusion about the UNA project, our take-home message is before starting an experiment, it's very important, and the first thing to do is to define what you are going to measure clearly. Thank you for your listening. Video.
If I can manage to time. So if you have any questions, this is the time. Questions? Frank and you. Any questions?
How did you find more than one Yoda? Because you mentioned in the beginning yourself that there is only one Yoda known in the universe.
Well, we have no idea.
Yeah, the code.
There's some
Yes, that's one of the assumptions of the experiment. That's what we got funding for, so we maybe we are just going to find them. It would be nice to us as well.
It's certainly
You wanted to dance that as well?
Yeah.
We ran out of time to practice.
We're wondering, Yoda clearly dances. Why did you not? Why were you more interested in fighting than dancing?
Because it's kind of human. It was kind of human dance. So probably he just made us pleasure to show. So we want kind of very natural behavior.
Yeah, my dog does that all the time, so I
Okay.
So it's pretty much if you look from the outside world and judge the movement of an alien, or just like in the previous example, judge the solutions to a problem from a human perspective that might not be created from the alien perspective. So that's why
our group totally sympathizes with yours, and we will propose some ways of getting around that.
Is it really ethical to clone Yoda and then make Yoda's fight each other?
We didn't. Well, the cloning is one of the options and approaches to our experiment, but we somehow assume, in collaboration with our chef of the whole project, that maybe there's more Yodas and the sources of Yodas are quite undefined, like our budget and time. But yes.
I think this is definitely a good point though, but we did consider
Maybe
that.
he's distributed and he likes to have a lot of physical appearance.
And also, linking my question to what has just been said, did you use like real lightsabers in your fighting, or were there simulations? So did you like die in dolphins, or?
Oh, they don't die because otherwise we wouldn't have to do the experiment number 3.
Again,
yes.
Or we don't have any subjects to do it.
Like simulations of.
Well, yes. Training fights, which are used in teaching and
use those low power lightsabers.
They have to use that a lot, like they train their masters.
More questions?
Alright, good afternoon everybody and welcome to CogNoscar. We'll see who Vogons are and we'll talk more about their creativity. Before we start that, let's just see who are Vogons. We find references to Vogons in mainly The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that started as a radio broadcast on BBC. It converted into a series of books, movies, TV series and graphic novels, and that's the sole source of knowledge of the Vogon race. I just want you to have a look at this video, and then we'll.
start the whole thing.
Birds are one of the most unpleasant races in the galaxy. Not evil, but bad-tempered, bureaucratic, officious and callous. They wouldn't even lift a finger to save their own grandmothers from the ravenous bug-batter beast of trout without orders, signed with triplicate, sent in, sent back, queried, lost, found, subjected to public inquiry, lost again, and finally buried in soft pink for 3 months and recycled as fireworks. On no account should you allow a bogart to read poetry to you.
They can't think, they can't imagine. Most of them can't even spell, they just run things.
So they can think, they can imagine, they are bureaucrats and they just run things. These are the things that we have to take home in terms of who are Vogons, and these are the guys who are involved in the team. It was a pretty massive project. We were really serious about it and we did some research and we found a particularly convincing website, and I'm sure you will cite it in your papers as well. It's called www.wikipedia.com. So we wanted to have an overall look on the creativity of Vogons, so that's why we divided our team into 3 parts basically. So Joanna and Guy will talk about the creative products that are created by Vogons, followed by David and myself. We'll talk more about the objective and subjective tests for individual creativity, and that will be followed by Pinar, who will talk more about the group creativity of Vogons. So I'll hand over the presentation to Joanna.
Okay, so we can do a little bit of cultural analysis. Sorry?
Hello?
I mean, our approach was to look at the productivity of the Vogons, to try and examine what they've made, what they've created, and to find a way for our experimental colleagues to analyze the question, how Vogons created. So, broadly speaking, we have architecture, design, fashion, and poetry. And poetry is probably the most famous aspect of what could be called creative about Vogon. I'm sorry, but in the interest of science, I'm going to have to do this. It's going to hurt me as much as it will hurt you. Oh, Fredel Gruntsbugly, thy micturations are to me as pleasant dapplebotches that modestly have flirted out spirited journals into a rancid, festering, confectious organ squealer. Now the jerkling, slated agro-Brussels are slurping haggardly of the actal growth, and living globules fart and slipulate like jowling knitted liver slime. Group and body my footing turling grooves, and hoopiously drangle me with crinkly bindle woes, or else I shall rend thee in the glove of arts with my global function. See if I don't.
Thank you, Guy. Here we just see the quotation that we had before.
Sorry. There is more to say about Vogon poetry. What I find interesting is we found this on the internet, not always reliable source. This is a Vogon poetry slam as interpreted by humankind. And I think it's interesting that however bad Vogon poetry may be, it has in a way inspired others to create poetry. There's some kind of creative act, even if it's kind of degree of
So here we heard it before that this is the opinion of Ford Prefect, which is an alien journalist, and that works for the guide. So we are relying on his opinion, but we don't know if it's very trustworthy. And now we talk about fashion and astronomy.
So yeah, there's also interesting kind of exchange and flow between humankind and Vogonkind in this case. This is a Vogon, one iteration of a Vogon anyway, and that's a human. Vogons have very, very similar dress sense, and it appears to be based on a kind of late 18th century, early 19th century kind of English dress, worn by office clerks, and also John Bull. This is John Bull, who, those who don't know, is kind of like an Uncle Sam, but of great difference. He's a kind of archetypal national figure. And he's depicted here by James Gilroy, the Regency artist and caricaturist. And there is some evidence that the inspiration has been taken by the designer of Vogon clothes from Gilroy's drawing. And then, of course, there's the gastronomy aspect. There's actually quite a lot to say about Vogons. Cooking, of course, is a creative act. Vogons don't cook themselves, but they do like to eat. They like to eat finely. They have a whole race of cooks who produce their food for them. They also like the food on board.
Okay, the personality traits we saw in the video before. So they are very bureaucratic and don't have much empathy as they destroy the earth. And they are very selfish. So about the architecture, this is also from the guides that they say that uglier things have been spotted in the skies, but not very reliable. So we would like to ask if isn't ugly great, or does it matter if it's ugly or if it's beautiful? And technology, we know that they suddenly discovered the principles of interstellar travel. So they had this insight, and I think they work that way, and I think we will see further in our experiments.
This was basically their eureka moment, but they only had one in their entire history.
Okay, so we have observed some evidence that Vogons display creativity, but as scientists we want to measure that a bit more directly. And one way you can do that is by looking at creative achievement. And that's something that's very generalizable across all different races. So looking at creative achievement will not only help us answer this question, are Vogons creative, but it also shed a bit more light on the nature of their creativity, such as, is it a general ability to be creative across all domains, or is it a particular motivation or talent, for example with the poetry, that they're creative in one specific domain? Okay, so we already have, humans already have an established method for measuring creative achievement, and it's called the Creative Achievement Questionnaire. And we modified that to... Sorry. Okay, that's it, yes. So we modified that to fit the Vogon domains of ability. So for example, they're sadistic, so we can measure their sadistic behavior. So how many crabs have you killed in your life, for example? That's something that they do. Anyway, so what we do is administer this questionnaire, but I don't particularly like that as a subjective measure because Vogons are sadistic and they might want to ruin our research by lying to us. So, I also want to include an objective measure, and I was inspired by an objective. I was inspired for this objective measure by life on the Vogon planet. So, let's have a little watch of this video.
Turn the mic off, maybe? Turn the mic off.
Okay. Oh no, this is not very good. Are you enjoying this? Or basically, what happens on the bog sphere, if you have an original idea, you get slapped in the face by this strange little paddle organism that lives in the ground. So I thought that's a great measure of original thoughts, okay? And that would be applied to any race. So it's kind of a very objective measure. So the task would be very similar to this. We would have 6 different tasks. For example, a sadistic where we could ask them to think of as many ways as possible to kill a crab, and they could do that in all the different domains. And the number of slaps in each domain would tell us whether or not they're generally creative, or whether or not they're creative in one particular domain. And that will give us some insight into whether or not they're generally creative or creative just in one particular domain. And that leads us to our predictions. If they're not creative at all, they wouldn't get hit at all because they would not be generating any ideas. If they were generally creative, they would have an equal number of hits across all domains. And if there was a particular ability that would, for example with their poetry, they would get a lot of hits in the creative writing domain, but not on the others. And it's important to know whether or not they're creative generally or in a particular domain, because that will help us refine our measurements of creativity. But Vogons do not operate individually, they operate in teams. So to get a complete picture of how creative Vogons are, we need to consider their group's behavior, which is
before we do that, can we just quickly conduct an experiment? We have some questionnaires we created. We'll just do it very quickly. If you can pass it on. It's called the tick box questionnaire, and we have created specifically for this task. So there are 2 populations sitting here right in this roof, and they are the goblins of the Harry Potter and the Vogons of the Vogosphere, and we have determined this very secretly, so we are not going to reveal the name. But all you have to do is just to fill out this form. Thank you.
Can you?
No. Why are we mentioning about good creativity? Because good creativity is important because it says that you are creating something that is greater than the sum of created by the individuals. That's why we also wanted to look at creativity. Creativity cannot be just only individual property. It can also be a group property. So we think that we can take a group of Vogons and we can give them a task as a problem-solving task. So what is the task that we gave to them? It is finding the intergalactic way between the planets without destroying the other structures between the planets, like the other planets. It is a very tough task, actually. And they have to find the solution for this. So, but how we are evaluating them? We have a judge. Our judge is National Association of Intergalactic Organic Transportation. So, these associations will judge their solution in terms of how original they are, how many solutions they come up with, and how useful are their solutions. But this is not all in group creativity. How we will make sure that they are really creating together, how we will make sure that they are really collaborating together. One way is to ask them, and in the end of the task, some questions like, did you guys voice yourselves in the group creativity process? The second question could be, did you guys openly discuss about alternatives? And did you challenge each other? Are you sure? Can you rate us from 1 to 5? These are the questions to make sure about their creativity. But our hypothesis is that they will not be creative as a group because they are so obsessed with bureaucracy. I mean, like they do like forms. I mean, not that we don't like forms. I do like forms in the UK. I do really like filling all of the forms. So we think that they are not really creative in that sense as a group.
Okay, so that's basically it. I just wanted to say that we did consider ethics, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Not that that might be any way of the and we actually have already applied for ethical clearance, but it's possible that the form is buried underneath it.
Thank you.
Very quickly, any questions?
I was wondering about your objective measure
Yep.
and the thing slapping in the face. So you've got to be sure that the slappy creature knows what an original thought is as well.
Yeah.
And also, they might learn to not have them during the whole thing to task as well. So how do you control
we did think about this and we thought we could validate the measure before using it with human beings. So we could have two groups. So we could have one group of humans that have to think of 10 original thoughts, and then we count the number of slaps they get in relation to the 10 original thoughts. And then we'll have another group that has to think of one thought over and over again, the same thought. And if they also get 10 slaps, we can argue that it's not really measuring original thought, it's measuring something else.
Okay, great.
And that would be one way of validating as a measure.
Yes, one more question.
Go on then. I mean, just another question about that measure. I mean, I like the work you're doing at CogNovo, but I wonder whether you've applied a human idea of creativity to their situation and sort of failed to adapt it sufficiently. So, for instance, I mean, in a situation where what you class as creative thought, according to human criteria, results in getting slapped in the face, maybe the sort of creative, adaptive solution is to stop having those thoughts.
Yeah.
So, is there a problem there that you're judging them?
Well,
on
actually,
rather than theirs?
there is a way of reducing the number of hits you get in the face, and that's to not have an analytical thought process where you have lots of little ideas, you have one big insightful moment, and then you only get one hit instead of, for example, 10 hits from having small. And that could have been something that they evolved to have this one big insightful thought, like they did, Joanna said. They had one insightful moment after they come out of the bog, and then they developed interstellar space travel. You know, so.
And would that bias your measure?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually useless, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah.
But it'd be visible as well.
scientists from the starship Star Trek. Logic is the cement of our civilization. We are contacting you regarding Mr. Spock. Over the years, we noticed that Mr. Spock occasionally behaved in a non-logical fashion. We intend to conduct a case study experiment on him to test part of his human Vulcan condition. We kindly request your assistance.
If I want anything from you, I'll ask for it. All I require from you is that you answer it, yes or no.
We aim to answer the question, is Mr. Spock creative in a human way? Humans think a creative idea or product must be both novel and useful. However, due to their human nature, they have not reached an agreement. For them, creativity can be assessed as a trait, process and product. They usually rate it through an objective, cell-rated or other-rated measurement. We are going to adopt the same approach in our study. Mr. Spock is going to go back to his living quarters after a usual day at work. He is logically going to be hungry. We will have removed all sorts of nourishment from his quarters and placed him on a table. A Mungana is a tough shell delicacy from the planet Spork. It's a fruit with a labyrinthine internal structure. Mr. Spock's task will be to find a way to open and consume it. His only available tools to do so will be the ones naturally found in his home environment. In order to satisfy the human creativity framework, we will measure the time employed by Mr. Spock to complete the task. We will also ask a group of humans, you, to rate him as a creative person and a tool that he will have created to complete the task. After the task is completed, Mr. Spock will be asked to enter the holodeck, where he will fill in a self-report questionnaire about the process he went through. The holodeck is the only place where Mr. Spock will not be able to read people's minds, which could spoil the results of the experiment. All the measures this collected will be combined to form Mr. Spock's creativity profile. We hope to gain some more knowledge about hybrids' creative behavior in order to design future experiments. Live long and prosper.
Unfortunately, no Vulcans could actually be with us here today to answer your questions. We do have a remote link that we might be able to try and answer some of your questions with, but otherwise you might have to represent them.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to work, so we might have to represent them.
Yeah.
Does Mr. Spock know that he's going to be in this experiment, or is he just going to sort of walk into his room and then suddenly just find him there with his mango?
He doesn't actually know, but because Vulcans are very rational, And this study is very interesting, and it's rationally good for everyone. We admit that Mr. Spock will agree to participate. So we agree for him. Well, we admit that he will agree after.
Does Mr. Spock push the fat man or not?
It's too early to answer this kind of questions.
The study has not been conducted yet. The results after Mr. Spock consents to take part.
There you go. Will you leave him in the room until he figures a way out?
Sorry?
It's preferred.
Yeah, well, that would be it.
Yes.
How it could, because Mrs. Spock can read minds then, and how are you going to make sure he doesn't bias the experiment? But like when he's actually doing it, if he's, because he's not in the holodeck, is he? When he's dealing with his manga student.
Well, he lives in solitary in his living quarters, so we were sort of hoping that we might be able to film. Well, the Vulcans are going to film him and get the data from observation.
Indeed, he lives alone.
Does Mrs. Spock think the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one? Mrs. Spock think the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one? It's from Burned. It's from Star Trek. Just thought you can ask him. That's great. Does that so well?
Any more questions?
Okay, so obviously our alien was E.T. I think we were quite lucky because obviously our alien is very friendly and he's cooperative. But we decided to sort of make our question a little bit more sort of specific. So we're asking, can ETs think outside the box? And it's an exploratory study. So we'll talk to you about what we're going to be able to think of this.
Yeah. We have a paper. So yeah, if you want to, please refer to the paper for details and stuff.
Yeah, so we'll give you an overview of the background to our study, and that's essentially what angle we've taken on this. Hopefully you'll follow it logically. And we'll talk about what we mean by human versus alien creativity, whether they're one and the same, and what kind of angle we've taken on that. And we'll talk a little bit about content analysis, not in too much detail. And that leads on to our research questions, and again, we'll go through our methods review, and particularly ethics. We had interplanetary ethics to consider this time. We're going to talk about future work, because this is part of a big project that's been funded by the Canadian
Space Administration, because the US was not very friendly towards ET the first time around, so they decided not to partner with you.
So we all know from human definitions of creativity that it's, for a better word, a bit dodgy. But the essential definition is that something that's creative should be novel, it should be useful, and it should be appropriate. And there's also arguments that it should have intent or intention, and so we're gonna keep hold of that concept in our study.
Very briefly, if no one who hasn't watched ET before, oh, okay. to one person. So basically, this is what happens. E.T. is in a fact-finding botanical off-planet expedition with his fellow E.T.s, and they accidentally leave him behind. He forms a bond with the boy, and then he finds a way how to build a communicator after he gets very drunk. He gets very drunk, and then he realizes that he can make a communicator, and then he becomes sick, and then he gets rescued, and then it's very sad.
So we need to, as well as giving sort of this concept of creativity our own definition, obviously we need to consider E.T.'s view on this. And very fortunately for us, we have a new member of our research team. He's visited Planet Earth a few times. He's good friends with Elliot now. How old is he? 30 or so now?
Right now.
Yeah. And so he's part of our research team. And so E.T. is our research coordinator, and he's our interplanetary ambassador. So he's going to help us consider any ethics, any funding issues we need to think about. And he also has some good insights on experimental design and what he likes to call superior analysis.
So one major issue was, so when you observe, let's say, kids or animals, we have a pretty solid idea of what would be novel for them, and what is creative for them, what is thinking outside the box. But when you consider an alien species like E.T., you don't know what is his background, you don't know what are his ways of thinking, and furthermore, he's not used to any of the objects he can see on Earth. So he doesn't have this box that he needs to think outside of. And that is the situation in which we find, and that is a problem that we tried to investigate. So we took a fairly objective standard definition of creativity, which is at the intersection of novelty, intent, and value, and try to find a task that will allow us to measure that in E.T.
Oh, I guess what we're trying to say is that in our content analysis of primary documents led by Spielberg 1982 and Oswald 2002, we can see that E.T. exhibits a lot of behavior that we would associate with exploratory learning behavior. So E.T. can acquire language, can build tools, very open, is fine with being cross-dressed, drinks alcohol without knowing what it is. And he also exhibits cross-synaptic synchronization, which is informally known as set capabilities, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in our future work. He also exhibits analogy making. That's kind of the core of our research, and I think Tomo will want to talk about that a little later on. For more information on E.T., you can consult CogNovo 2002 over there.
So we're just going to watch a little video of E.T.'s creative process as shown in Spielberg 1982.
So you want to see what's going on?
Yeah, so E.T. finds an umbrella and is very scared of it, and clearly has no idea what is the use of this object. A bit later on, he looks at it, he reads his comic book and finds a parabolic antenna used as a means to ask for help.
And then combined with footage he sees later on the TV, he realizes that he can use other materials and create an interplanetary communication device with it. And using a phone. By the way, like a lot of creative artists, E.T. had his most brilliant idea after having a beer.
So we try to find a way to investigate whether this constituted creative behavior, keeping in mind that E.T. does not suffer from the limitations that we have. So when we see an umbrella, it's quite difficult for us to think outside the box because we are wired to think through experience that the umbrella has a specific use. E.T. does not have that. He comes to Earth, has no idea what any of the objects he encounters are for, and is able in that way to have a very novel attitude towards them. But for humans, we often consider creative behavior that breaks outside the boundaries, that breaks outside the box. So for example, in science, for example, if you in the invention of aviation, a key creative insight was that wings do not necessarily flap. You can use them fixed. That was a huge advance. In art, breaking outside conventional thinking is absolutely essential to our judgment of whether work is creative and original. So the term that is used in psychological research is functional fixedness. For example, if you want to create a paperweight and you had a hammer, you would not think of using the hammer in any other way than to pound on nails. So we tried to find a way to investigate that in ETs. The issue being that obviously they don't know any of human objects, so we had to find a task that would be that would work for them using objects that they have prior assumptions as to their function. And we used this, so we present ETs with a room in which there are two ropes hanging from two ropes and hanging from the ceiling. And the task is to tie a knot between the two ropes. So if you just grab one rope and try to reach the other one, you don't have enough. The reach is not sufficient to reach the other rope. But there is an object which is a reverse gravity engine, which you would think you could use this to maybe, if you look at that. So you would think you might be able to use this to get the rope a little bit closer. But the experiment has been carefully designed so that this is impossible. It is still a bit too far. However, if you remove this prior assumption, and you just keep the gravity engine turned off, you tie it to the rope, you push it one way, and wait for the pendulum effect. Then you can then grab the other rope and wait for it to come back to you. And in that way you can tie the two ropes. And for human beings, we had a similar experiment using a handheld vacuum cleaner, which has, you would think you could use that to extend your reach a little bit. But in practice, it's also a little bit too far. And you have to do the same thing, basically. You just tie it to the rope and use the pendulum effect. So we rated performance based on the solution time to figure out the solution and whether or not the problem was solved. So we have not yet performed the experiment, and I'm going to pass on for the ethics considerations.
So we have a very, we are very strict regarding the ethics application. We are in touch with the ET, we are in touch with the ET leader. So we have lots of documents and we have a very short partnership between us. They agree to participate in our studies, and from the documents we have, they are very interested in our plans. So instead of their participation, they will be paid with plans.
Turnips in particular, they're very interested in turnips.
Exactly.
That's true, it's another term.
And
Hot Twinkle 2002.
And nothing is invented here, so we are very friendly with them.
And then obviously in terms of future research, we haven't just been funded for this sort of preliminary study. It's a wider project, the first ever sort of intergalactic psychological experiment, and that's why obviously our first paper is going to be published in
Interplanetary Psychology.
Interplanetary Psychology, which is a brand new journal. And so our study will be hopefully one of many that will be published in that journal. But as part of the participation and the way that this research exchange will work, we're going to do this first experiment on them, and we're going to study creativity from our perspective, working with them. And then a small cohort of humans, hopefully some CogNovians will volunteer to go over, we'll go to them, and then they'll study us from their perspective of creativity.
If you notice, E.T. is occupying, I think, Ilaria's desk. Ilaria will be sent to study to study linguistics. Yeah. And you happen to be the desk that when I turn around to take this photo. We just wanted to say something about one of the future directions for research. Just a short clip about. So this is in the documents, in the documentary, we see that when E.T. was sick and Elliot was sick, in fact what happened was their brain waves were synchronized. And so there is a strong evidence to suggest that E.T. can communicate psychically and can engage in cross-synaptic synchronization. And we were wondering whether this might have effect on his creative behavior. So some of the studies we'll do later on is to see whether psychic abilities influence his creative abilities.
And this will also bring us lots of answer to lots of questions we have about the creativity in humans, in other species. So this kind of research is extremely interesting for us and for them.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you are allowed. Oh, sorry, questions. I'm getting so excited about the voting. Any questions?
You mentioned the psychic, the brainwaves synchronizing. Doesn't that happen when people are just talking to each other anyway? So it doesn't necessarily, does it mean it's psychic, or does it just mean each is very good at communicating?
Yeah, so there's obviously there's synchronizations at a behavioural and a neural level when humans communicate. But cross-synaptic synchronization, which we coined ourselves, oddly enough, is more of a process by which it's embodied as well. So the feelings, there's a feeling overlap. So when one experiences shock, the other one will also experience shock. So it goes beyond cognition. It's sort of
and it works across very long distances as well.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, just the process of Spielberg 1982. The umbrella scene in particular, and the beer scene.
Yeah, during the beer scene, Elliot, who was in school at the time, gets really drunk in school while E.T. is drinking. So he starts flirting with his girl, doing sort of crazy stuff due to the CSS.
Okay. Powerful.
I think there's a question from Peter and from Jack.
Yeah, sure. Just the pendulum experiments, an ingenious design. We're just got a question about interpreting the results really. So Lloyd Morgan's canon, of course, tells us that we should interpret the behaviour of an animal as being a result of a high psychological faculty if we can interpret it as the result of what's low on the scale. Your experiment seems fairly amenable to solution just by trial and error, just by solving by accident. Do you have any way of distinguishing between the sort of...
Yes. So I think I didn't explain the experiment in complete detail, but we are controlling this. What we are looking at is we are measuring ET with the gravity, reverse gravity engine, and with the handheld cleaner, which he does not have any experience with or knowledge of how to operate it. So he has both one device which will interfere with, which has a fixed functionality, and one which does not. And what we are comparing is the difference in solving time and ability to solve the problem between the two devices.
I think, and the other response we would give to that is that it's the task has to be performed under a limited time. So the chance that it's a random, that they solve it randomly is fairly low, like 15 minutes, I think, is what we said. 10 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry, Jack, thank you.
it's sort of simple.
If E.T. were here, he would know what it does.
He's right.
More questions? Thank
you. Can I please have a karaoke?
I haven't. All right. Well, well done, everybody. That was a fantastic afternoon's entertainment, and I can't believe you all knocked that together in such a short time. So fantastic, great. Fantastically close. And very, very, very tightly won by Team 4. Trophy, which is going to become an icon for the rest of CogNovo. We're going to put all the names down of the people who won each of the competitions, starting with the last one actually, so it was Frank and Christos, I think. We'll have our names recorded for posterity, and when people come back and ask about creativity, you'll know that you contributed to the future of civilization. Everybody for really taking part in that. Thanks to Michaela for organising a great week. I hope to see you all in CogJam tonight, and I hope we'll have a great party. Of course, very nice to be. She will put up these great videos of all your activities, and if you're not very nice to be, I'm going to what's going to come up actually. So thanks to me for filming the activity.